and there's unlawful detainments and stuff like that. I mean, the people are not looking to law enforcement as a place of safety. And so my question is then, how does law enforcement regain that respect and that honor from the community? Because I believe in order for crimes to be reported, you have to have a rapport with the community. But when the community becomes your enemy, because they feel as if you are not serving, you are not protecting, how can we get crime out of our communities if the people do not want to work with law enforcement? And so the respect is not there anymore. Chief, I mean, even me as an African American man, I live in Henderson, and me driving my car and I'm getting pulled over, I'm making sure my hands are seen. I'm making sure that I'm communicating so that it will not be misunderstood what I'm doing, so that I would not be hurt. You know, I have some fear too. So do I feel protected? To a degree, and I'm a law-abiding citizen. But when you see the news and what's going on in our nation, there is a lack of respect now, a lack of honor, a lack of credibility towards law enforcement from the community.
Sure. And
you know what's really sad? You know, I always preach to my girls, okay, how to act around police officers, and it's a daggone shame that I have to even do that with my youngest daughter's boyfriend.
Sure.
You know, he's a big kid.
Sure.
And he has dreads.
Sure.
And, you know, I don't want him caught up in something stupid.
Exactly. But that's the challenge that we're having, because I believe that, and the chief shared a little bit earlier of how there is proper training, and you're not supposed to allow your personal feelings or your personal perceptions of an individual to influence how you police. But there are so many stereotypes that are influencing our law enforcement, and they're treating people like they're not even human.
Right. And you all raised some amazing points. And so let me address a few of them. In terms of the traffic stop element, their traffic stops just on their very nature create a rise in your blood pressure, because you got all the lights going on, and the first question you're asking is, what in the world did I do? And so it's not a comfortable experience, particularly at night. And on a traffic stop, you know, there's some things that the officer is allowed to do. He or she is allowed to ask for your license and registration. He or she is allowed to make plain view observations. They're allowed to check to see if the person is wanted. They're allowed to, you know, ask other questions about the insurance and the registration if things don't add up. Mm-hmm. So there are, and they're also allowed to use the bright lights and so forth so they can see in the car for officer safety. So there are a lot of things that the officers are allowed to do by law. And of course, their officers are not allowed to stop a car for no reason. They have to have some type of either reasonable suspicion or probable cause.
I'm so glad you said
yes,
that.
Yes, sir.
What would be a reasonable suspicion?
Okay. Let me give a couple of examples.
Okay.
One example would be, let's say that there is an area that the officer is patrolling, and this area is having issues with burglaries. And let's say the burglaries are happening between 1 o'clock in the morning and 3 in the morning, according to all the data that they have and all the crime mapping that the officers are accustomed to. Mm-hmm. And so it's 2 o'clock in the morning, and an officer sees a car coming from behind the Best Buy at 2 o'clock in the morning. He's just, as a matter of fact, as soon as he pulls in, this car is kind of slowly pulling out and drives off onto the street. Now, when you look at the fact that, okay, we've been hit with a lot of burglaries back there. It's usually happening between 1 and 3 o'clock and those types of things. That at least gives the officer reasonable suspicions that a crime may have occurred or just have occurred. So that would allow that officer to stop that person and just do what is known as an investigatory stop. which allows him to ask questions or her to ask questions. Who are you? May I see some ID? Check the registration on the vehicle and so forth and so on. But that stop has to be conducted within a reasonable amount of time. And courts vary from state to state. Some courts say 10 minutes, some say 20 minutes, but it has to be a reasonable amount of time. It has to be a brief detention. Now, during that stop, if the officer develops probable cause, let's just say the officer says, hey, I'm behind 123 Anywhere Street and I'm behind the Best Buy. And he sends another officer up to the Best Buy, and now they find that the door is pried open or a window looks like it's been pried open. Now we're moving a little more towards probable cause.
Sure.
Because now you see what I'm saying? Or reasonable suspicion would be something as simple as the officer or the trooper is driving down, let's just say 95 and outside of Orlando. He sees a car weaving all over the place.
Okay.
It's 2 o'clock in the morning after the bars have let out, and one of the signs of an or a possible intoxicated driver is weaving and or sudden braking and that type of stuff. So when he or she sees that gives them probable cause that based on these are the factors associated with this type of criminal violation, because driving while intoxicated is a crime. Now I'm going to make a traffic stop. Okay. Now during that traffic stop, the officer should identify him or herself. He should inform the citizen of why they're being stopped, and then of course go into the other aspects of the stop, the license and registration, or if they're going to be sobriety tests and so forth. So that's ideally what's supposed to happen.
So reasonable suspension has nothing to do with ethnicity.
No.
It should not have anything to do with ethnicity or the type of car you are driving, or if you don't look as if you belong in a certain community.
No. Ethnicity should not play into it unless, for example, we have witnesses or we've gotten information that the suspects in our robberies are 2 white males or 2 Oriental males between this size, wearing this, and they were last seen driving a dark pickup truck.
Sure.
Now that ethnicity, absolutely, because it's about the time the robberies have been happening. I see a dark pickup truck coming down the street with 2 Oriental males in it. Sure. So in that case, yes, but just the fact that I see an African-American man driving a BMW, no. There's no reasonable suspicion there. There's no probable cause there.
Hey, Pastor Kerry, they used to do that to you
exactly,
all the time.
which is my challenge. And when you experience something like that, Chief, your respect level diminishes for law enforcement because it seems as if you are being stereotyped, you're being chosen to see if there's something illegal going on in your life, which makes the average immature person not look to law enforcement as a place of safety.
Sure, absolutely. And I can certainly understand that. I've been stopped before, driving years ago. And so I understand, and I understand. And so these are things, again, that agencies around the country are working towards. And unfortunately, this is not going to change anytime soon. This is going to require a concerted effort at training and retraining and doing internal investigations and sometimes terminating people.
Okay. I have to ask you this, Chief.
Yes, sir.
I have to ask you this. I understand it's going to take time and training.
Yes, it is.
I do. But what happens when these things go on in our communities and it is not reprimanded? When you see public display of misconduct by law enforcement, where there is physical undeserved abuse, you have undeserved murder, you have undeserved conduct, to me, that is not honorable. And when it goes through court and our judicial system, it seems as if it's swept under a rug. I've seen in the last several years police officers who were blatantly wrong be exonerated and excused and get to go home. And you have people who are deceased now because of their behaviors, the policemen's behaviors, and we see it on television. We see it on YouTube. People are recording things on their camera, and it is showing the misconduct of police, but it goes unreprimanded. My question to you is, how can a people believe in policing, respect it, or feel protected when they're getting away with murder in the eyes of the community?
Well, that's a great question, and a couple of things have to happen there, and we, of course, we know this whole videotape thing started. Well, people have been videotaping for decades, but it really came to light with Rodney King, moved right up into Freddie Gray, into the South Carolina shooting,
yes.
into all these other things. So videos have been around, and now, of course, everyone has a video camera. So I guess it's sort of a twofold answer, Pastor C. Number one, in terms of the communities, and this is one of the things that I used to say as a district commander, I used to say this as a deputy chief. The community has to understand that that is your police department. And the reason I say that is because all those fancy cars, all the weapons, all the technology, all the uniforms, all that stuff is paid for by tax dollars. So that is your police department. And so I encourage everyone within the sound of our voice, get active with your local police department.
That's good.
Join that civic association, that police advisory board, get in the Citizens Police Academy, go to National Night Out, do ride-alongs. You need to understand what is happening with your investment.
Come on.
You know? Because when you go and buy, for example, you don't go to McDonald's and settle for cold French fries.
No, you take them back. No, my wife don't either.
You take them back.
Right.
So it's the same thing. So imagine now you're paying $20 to $30 million of your tax dollars as a community. So why are you going to accept warm French fries?
You're right.
You know, you need to be involved. You need to hold the chief accountable. You need to hold the district commander accountable and so forth. But you need to work with your agency. You need to get involved with your agency. That's one thing. Secondly, from the police department's perspective, again, this is why it's so important that along with the basic things that officers need, you know, all of the defensive tactics and the fancy cars and the CSI type stuff, it's so important that the officers have to have a large degree of problem-solving skills, mediation skills. Now, some people might not agree with that, and I'm okay with that.
Okay.
But where we came from, back in Maryland, we called that good police work, because that was another tool that the officers had to maintain the quality of life in that community.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Being able to get out of your car and diffuse a situation, even when you were dealing with someone that was really agitated, being able to bring them down. You know, again, the majority of people are reasonable. Might take you a little bit longer,
right?
But to bring that person down so that you can figure out what's going on. And if you have to make an arrest, then you make an arrest.
Sure.
But again, there's no need to, as the young kids say, to do the extra stuff. I know if Ambezi was here, she'd say, "Why are people so extra?"
Right.
You know,
right.
There wouldn't be any need for any extra stuff. You know,
right.
You put the guy in handcuffs or the girl in handcuffs. You move along and so forth and so on. The extra beating and all the other things, totally unnecessary. The situations that we've seen, the situation in well, let's start back with Rodney King. Take it back historically. There was no need to beat that guy like that.
Right.
You had that many people around there.
Yes.
No need to beat that guy like that.
Absolutely.
When we look at the incident in South Carolina where the gentleman was running away from the officer and he shot the guy in the back.
Yes.
You know, no need for that.
No need.
No need for that. So I'm not going to sit here and justify poor police service because there's no justification for it.
Thank you.
Now, are there times when mistakes happen? Absolutely. For example, when an officer gets to the point where they have to use some of their less lethal technology, that would be your asbaton or your pepper spray, as it's known on the street. Mm-hmm. No normal person is going to stand there and say, "Oh, officer, I need you to strike me right here. That's the proper technique."
Right.
When that metal hits bone, you're going to get away from that, and you're going to start wiggling and so forth and so on. So the target is going to move. The striking target is going to move. Same thing with being pepper sprayed. So yeah, you may have the marks from the handcuffs because you're talking about metal on skin. You may have the mark from the tip of the aspeton because you're talking about metal on skin. But again, these are not intentional injuries. This is just the result of using the